At age 74, I was recovering in the hospital when my wife took everything, the house, the money, even my dog, and moved her new lover into our bedroom. She thought I was weak. I let her think she'd won, but she had no idea I'd already prepared all and left her with nothing. I never thought my golden years would start with so much heartbreak. The day I came home from a hospital felt like it should have been a victory parade. After all, I had survived a difficult heart operation. I was finally free from those cramped corridors with their beeping machines, and I looked forward to my own bedroom, a warm meal, and the peace I'd spent decades working toward. But the moment I turned the key in the front door and walked in, I realized that what waited for me wasn't peace. It was a betrayal. It was emptiness, as though the life I'd built had been dismantled while I was lying in that hospital bed. In case we haven't met, my name is Henry, and I'm 74 years old. I worked my whole life as a property manager and part-time accountant, though I wouldn't say I was ever wealthy. Still, I had enough saved up to retire comfortably. I had a decent house in a quiet neighborhood, a loyal dog named Jasper, and, or so I believed, a loving wife named Lydia. We'd been married almost 40 years. She was the one who took care of me when I first felt the tingling in my chest and the shortness of breath that ended up being something more serious than heartburn or age. When the cardiologist said I needed urgent bypass surgery, she was the one who patted my hand and told me not to worry. She'd handle everything at home. She insisted I focus on healing, and that when I got back, all would be just as I left it. I held on to that promise like a drowning man clings to a life raft. I remember the night before surgery, how I lay awake staring at the hospital ceiling, imagining the day I would return. My biggest fear was that maybe I wouldn't wake up from the anesthesia, or that if I did, I wouldn't be able to get around without help. I had no idea that what I really should have feared was what Lydia was doing behind my back. The surgery was a success, albeit a painful one. My chest felt like an elephant had tap danced on it. The hospital food made me miss the simplest home-cooked meals. Then one day, the doctor said he had good news. I was stable enough to continue my recovery at home. Home. That single word lit a spark of hope in my heart. I pictured the sunlight through my living room windows and the comfortable hush of my own walls. Most of all, I imagined Lydia's kind, relieved smile. But that's not what I got. I had to take a taxi because Lydia didn't show up to bring me home. She said something about her car needing maintenance, but told me to just call a cab and not to worry. It struck me as odd because we had two vehicles, and I knew hers had been running fine a month ago. Still, my priority was to get back and rest. The taxi dropped me off in front of the house, and I felt my heart skip a beat. The lawn, once so neatly trimmed, had grown ragged. A couple of the big rose bushes we'd planted were drooping like they hadn't been watered in weeks. That was my first clue. Something was off. I shuffled up the steps with my cane. It was an ugly, rubber-tipped contraption, but it kept me steady. I had a thick bandage across my chest under my shirt, and every breath felt tender. My key turned in the lock, but the door seemed stiff, like it hadn't been opened from the outside in a while. The minute I walked in, I knew the house was different. My recliner was gone. Not just moved, but gone entirely. The curtains on the front window were replaced with something lacy and new. The place smelled like strong perfume instead of the comforting mixture of furniture polish and homemade biscuits I was used to. For a moment, I thought I had the wrong house, except it definitely was mine. The walls were still the same color, though the pictures that used to hang in the hallway had been taken down. In their place were strange, abstract paintings that didn't belong to me. The more I looked, the more my heart hammered. Where was my dog? Jasper wasn't running up to greet me. I stood there, gripping my cane, anxiety rising with each second. Then I heard laughter coming from the direction of my bedroom. I recognized Lydia's voice. She was laughing in a way I hadn't heard her laugh in years, this giddy, carefree sound. A male voice joined in, and my grip on the cane went tight enough to make my hand shake. Before I could process the betrayal, a stranger walked out into the hallway, wearing my bathrobe. He was maybe in his 50s, stocky, with thinning hair and a smirk on his face. He looked me up and down, and for a beat, I'm not sure which of us was more surprised. He had the gall to say, "Who are you, old man?" I couldn't get words out right away. My mind was spinning like a record on a broken turntable. Lydia appeared behind him, wearing the pearl necklace I'd given her for our 25th anniversary. She had her hair done up in a style she hardly ever used around me. Her face froze the second she saw me, and then she forced a smile. "Oh, Henry, you're home early," she said, as though I were some friend who had dropped by without calling. She tried to hustle the man back into the bedroom, telling him, "Go on, I'll handle this." And he disappeared like a coward. There I was, hurting from stitches and heartbreak, standing in what used to be my own hallway. Lydia's eyes darted around nervously. I asked her, "What in God's name is going on here?" in a voice I barely recognized as my own. She looked almost offended. She started giving me a rehearsed speech about how things change, how she thought I might not survive the surgery, how she needed comfort and companionship in my absence, and how this new man was helping her realize she deserved more from life than taking care of a sick old husband. I asked again about my dog, Jasper. She waved her hand dismissively, saying, "Oh, him? I gave him away to a neighbor. You know, I was never a dog person, Henry." It felt like a punch to my gut. I didn't know I could feel so much anger and pain combined. The worst part was the sense that she felt justified in everything she was saying. Then she told me that she'd already sold some of our furniture, took the liberty of updating the house to suit her new lifestyle, and she'd used our joint savings to fund it all. Just like that. Without a thought for me. Just like we never built that life together in the first place. I felt an overwhelming urge to scream, but my body was too fragile. The most I could do was stare. My voice came out shaky. "Lydia, how could you? We've been married for almost 40 years. She cut me off, saying something like, "Henry, I'm sorry, but I can't live like this anymore. I've found someone else. You'll have to figure things out on your own." Then she had the nerve to suggest I move in with our daughter, as though I were some burden. She said, "Patricia has more room, and it'll be easier for you to recuperate there anyway." That was the moment I realized how deep this betrayal ran. She didn't just replace me, she wanted me gone, out of sight, out of mind, as if I were an inconvenient guest. I couldn't bear another second in that hallway. I turned and left, walking slowly, every step a painful reminder of the fragile condition of my heart. I sat on the front step and dialed my daughter Patricia. She was furious. Apparently, Lydia had led her to believe I'd asked to stay in the hospital longer, and that Lydia had my blessing to update the place. Patricia didn't have the details on this new man or the disappearance of our joint funds. She begged me to come to her home right away, but I said I needed a moment to myself. So I waited for another taxi, got in, and went to a nearby motel. I spent that night staring at the peeling wallpaper, going through all the stages of grief. Denial, that ugly hope that maybe Lydia was just confused. Anger, imagining the ways I could confront her. Shame for feeling blindsided. And sadness because the woman I once loved so deeply had cast me aside. By dawn, a new feeling crept in, a feeling that both frightened and invigorated me. A calm determination, one that came from all my decades of experience with property, finances, and paperwork. I told myself, I may be old, but I'm not helpless. I may be slow, but I'm not blind. I know exactly how to protect what little is mine. That morning, I had breakfast at a small diner. Eggs, toast, and a cup of black coffee. For the first time since the hospital, I felt the warmth of hope. You see, for many years I'd been managing not just my own properties, but also helping friends with their tax documents. I had learned how to create trusts, read the fine print in deeds and mortgages, and structure finances in ways that might not be obvious to someone who had never been deeply involved with these details. Lydia had been under the impression that our joint savings were everything we had, but there were other investments, separate accounts in my name and in living trusts. It was how I protected us from certain liabilities over the years. She never asked. She never seemed interested in the details. So she likely had no idea that the money she drained was a fraction of our total worth. I sat there in that diner, planning. If Lydia thought she could claim the house, She'd discover soon enough that the deed was actually held in a trust that was structured to give her partial survivorship rights only in the event of my death. Since I was very much alive, Lydia's ability to legally transfer the property to herself or put the new man's name on it was limited. She might have tried, but she'd run straight into the brick wall of legal documents I'd spent decades perfecting. My next stop was a lawyer's office, an unassuming little brick building downtown with a green awning. I knew the lawyer, Gary, from church. He was a mild-mannered gentleman, younger than me by a fair margin, but well-versed in estate law. I explained the situation. When I told him about Lydia emptying our joint account, clearing out the furniture, and basically forcing me out of my own home, Gary's eyes widened. "Henry, you've got a strong case," he said. "But are you sure you want to take immediate action?" I gave him a single nod. Lydia had made her choice. My job was to defend my financial stability. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to spend another second feeling sorry for myself. Gary drew up the papers I needed. There was a process. We had to prove that I was not incompetent, that I did not relinquish control of the property or accounts voluntarily. The house was in a trust, so I had immediate grounds to evict anyone trying to live there without my consent. It didn't matter that it was my wife. The trust held the keys, not her. "Henry," Gary said quietly, "you're going to face some personal upheaval here, but legally, you're on solid footing." I just nodded and thanked him. Then I called Patricia and filled her in. She offered to let me move in with her, but I declined for the time being. I wanted to see this through myself. I spent the next several days setting things in motion. First, I drove slowly and carefully to the local pound. With some luck, I found Jasper. The neighbor Lydia had given him to had apparently decided he didn't want the responsibility, so he abandoned Jasper at the shelter. My poor dog was whimpering and trembling in a cage, but his tail nearly wagged off when he recognized me. That moment, reuniting with Jasper, gave me the emotional boost I needed. I promised him no one would ever rip us apart again. Next, I called the utility companies. Since the house was in a trust, the gas, electricity, and water accounts were in my name, not Lydia's. I asked them to hold off on any payments, freeze the accounts, and clarify that no unauthorized person was allowed to make changes. When Lydia realized that her brand new living arrangement might be missing essentials, maybe she'd realize the mess she'd created. Then I filed the eviction notice against all occupants at that address who weren't authorized by me or by the trust. It was a legal formality, but crucial. The court papers would inform Lydia and her new partner that they had no legal right to stay. I made sure to have them served quickly. During this time, I stayed mostly at Patricia's, but I visited Gary every couple of days to check on the progress. The deeper we dug, the more we found that Lydia had been moving money around for weeks. She'd maxed out one of our joint credit cards, tried to open a new line of credit using both our names, clearly forging my signature, and sold off furniture I had purchased long before we married. She'd even lied to certain neighbors, telling them I was too ill to make decisions, that she was forced to act on my behalf. It was infuriating, but I kept calm. At every turn, I used the legal documents, the trust, the power of well-organized finances. The more Lydia tried to push, the more she sank into quicksand of her own making. And one afternoon, it all came crashing down for her. My phone started buzzing around lunchtime. I picked up to the sound of Lydia on the other end, practically shrieking. "Henry, what have you done?" "The water's shut off. The power's cut. I got a notice saying we have to vacate." "You can't do that. This is my home too." I took a measured breath. "Actually, it's not," I said. "Not according to the trust documents. You might want to speak to a lawyer." She kept yelling, calling me names, accusing me of heartlessness. She even tried to say I was abandoning her. I couldn't help but find it ironic. She had literally thrown me out after I got out of the hospital. So I ended the call. The next time she tried to reach me, I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't about to engage with emotional manipulation. You learn, over decades, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep silent. Let them talk themselves in circles. Patricia later told me Lydia had called her, sobbing that she had nowhere to go. Patricia told Lydia exactly what she told me. She was disgusted by what Lydia had done, and while she wouldn't let her mother become homeless, she also didn't condone the betrayal. Lydia's new boyfriend, the one who had strutted through my hallway in my bathrobe, tried to interject with some vague threats about what they would do if I didn't cooperate. But legally, he had zero standing. He wasn't married to Lydia, didn't own the house, wasn't on any paperwork. He was just a trespasser. Time passed in a slow blur of phone calls, legal back and forth, and quiet evenings petting Jasper, while I wrote in my journal. On the outside, maybe I appeared weary, but inside I was more determined than ever. My heart might be frail, but my spirit was not. I asked Gary to expedite the eviction proceedings. He assured me it was almost done. Soon, a sheriff's deputy would be at the door of my house, handing Lydia and her boyfriend an order to leave the premises immediately. If they refused, they'd be forcibly removed. I took no joy in that, but I also didn't feel pity. She'd left me with no other choice. The day after the eviction order was served, I decided to drive by my property. I found Lydia and that man hauling boxes to a rented truck. She spotted my car and made her way over. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, although I couldn't tell if they were real tears or just a tactic. "How can you do this to me?" she asked. "After so many years together, how can you be so cold?" I just stared at her, unflinching. In a calm voice, I said, "I trusted you. I gave you everything. You sold my furniture. You tried to take my house. You got rid of my dog, Lydia. You broke my heart." Her tears dried up right then. Maybe she realized any attempt to guilt me was pointless. She turned and trudged back to the house, shoulders slumped. That was the last time we spoke face to face. I waited a few more hours, and after they pulled away with their truck, I got out of my car, walked up the steps, and turned the key in the lock. A wave of relief washed over me when I stepped into the house. Yes, it looked different. Yes, much of the furniture was missing. But it was my house. I was home. The quiet was overwhelming. I sat down on an old wooden chair that had been too ugly to sell, and I let out a long breath. For all the hurt, a flicker of triumph glowed in my chest. Not because I felt victorious, but because I had taken a stand for my dignity. Over the following weeks, I set about rebuilding. I had the locks changed, reactivated the utilities, and reached out to a local secondhand shop to find a few pieces of furniture to fill the empty rooms. The neighbors were mostly supportive, though a couple believed Lydia's tall tales and gave me disapproving looks. I didn't bother correcting them. I knew the truth, and that was enough. Patricia stopped by often to help me clean up. We found trash and half-eaten food Lydia and her partner left behind, even some broken dishes. It was a mess, but we tackled it with a mix of determination and mild amusement. Jasper trotted around, sniffing every corner, as if he couldn't believe he had his old territory back. One afternoon, while going through the remnants of Lydia's redecorating, I found a pile of receipts. They showed exactly how much of our savings she'd blown on pointless items. Expensive bed linens, a gaudy chandelier, dinner at fancy restaurants. Part of me was shocked. Had she always been this way, harboring some desire for a lavish life that I couldn't provide? Or was this a late-in-life crisis, triggered by my health scare? The truth might be somewhere in between, but it didn't matter. That chapter was closed. It took a while to sort out the finances. The joint account was nearly drained, but that was the least of my worries, since most of my real money was protected. Gary helped me document everything, so I could potentially sue for damages if I wanted. I decided not to, at least not yet. I didn't want to spend the rest of my days tangled in lawsuits. It was enough to know I'd preserved my home, my dog, and the future I'd planned for my family. Lydia was out of my life. If she ever tried to come back for more, the legal fortifications around my trust would keep her from succeeding. The more complicated part was figuring out my emotional state. After everything, I found it difficult to sleep at night. I'd stare at the ceiling, replaying her betrayal. Sometimes I'd imagine going back in time, seeing if there was some sign I missed or some conversation we could have had that might have changed things. But eventually, I realized it wouldn't have mattered. She made her choices, cruel choices. No amount of love or patience for me would have stopped her. Knowing that gave me a strange peace, like I had permission to let it all go. Word got around eventually. Friends from the old neighborhood reached out, offering sympathy or confusion. People love to gossip, especially when they see an elderly couple suddenly split after decades together. Some suggested maybe I should try to reconcile, that I was being too harsh. But the truth is, forgiveness can be offered, yet trust is another story. The moment she let another man live in my house and took all our money, she ended any trust that had existed. What's done is done. Today I still live in the same house, though it feels new. I replaced the missing furniture and hung different photos on the walls. Pictures of my granddaughter, pictures of Jasper. The big wedding portrait of me and Lydia once held a place of honor above the fireplace. I took it down, tucked it away in a box in the attic. I'm not sure why I kept it. Maybe a part of me wants to remember that we weren't always enemies. There was a time we shared love and laughter. But that time is gone, and life has led us in separate directions. I've found a calmer routine now. Every morning, I drink my coffee on the porch, watch the sunrise. Jasper sits beside me, tail wagging, keeping me company. Despite my age, I still handle finances for a few clients, a bit of consulting that helps keep my mind sharp. Patricia visits on weekends, bringing fresh fruit and new stories about her career. Sometimes she jokes that I'm the strongest old man she knows. After all, I faced major surgery, plus the heartbreak of betrayal, and still came out on top. I'm not sure I feel strong. More than anything, I feel seasoned. Life has taught me the value of patience and the power of silent resolve. One day, I saw Lydia in town. She was stepping out of a rundown car with that man. They both looked tired, worn out. Maybe it was the stress of losing a legal battle. They thought they'd win easily. Or maybe it was just the weight of a guilty conscience, though I doubt it. She caught sight of me and quickly looked away. I didn't approach. There was nothing left to say. The old me might have felt obligated to try to talk things through, to find closure. But the new me realized that I didn't need her acknowledgement or apology. I already had my closure. I had my dignity, my house, and a peaceful life. No words were necessary. When people ask me about it, I only share as much as I want. Many seniors face betrayal by loved ones, relatives who think they can swindle an aging parent, partners who believe the older spouse won't fight back. Society paints us as weak and clueless, but we've lived long enough to develop resilience. I learned that quiet, decisive action is often more effective than yelling or creating a big scene. Sometimes the best response to betrayal is to stand firm in your rights and let the consequences fall where they may. A friend once told me, revenge is best served cold, but I don't quite see it that way. I never set out for revenge in the sense of hurting Lydia beyond what was necessary to protect myself and what was mine. I just refused to be trampled on. And if it stung her pride to be tossed out, well, that was on her. The house was never hers for the taking. She simply discovered that the minute she tried to claim it. My only real regret is that our marriage ended so bitterly after so many decades. I would have liked to live out my days in a comfortable old routine with a partner who cared. But people surprise you. Sometimes they show a side you never expected. The silver lining is this. I discovered I had the strength to stand up for myself when it mattered most. I discovered that even at 74, one heart surgery later, I'm still capable of fighting for my own dignity. That's something to hold on to. If you ever find yourself in a similar position, feeling weak or betrayed, remember that you're not as helpless as others might think. There are resources, there are legal avenues, there are people out there who can help you reclaim what's yours. Don't let fear or shame silence you. And don't buy into the lie that aging makes you useless. If anything, it gives you a lifetime of practice in dealing with tough situations. I keep one souvenir of Lydia's betrayal in a drawer by my bed, the notice I filed with the court, the eviction order. Sometimes I glance at it, and it reminds me of that day I returned home from the hospital, broken-hearted, only to find that the real heartbreak was yet to come. But it also reminds me of the power of perseverance, the importance of staying smart and composed when life blindsides you. In the end, I learned that losing someone who doesn't truly value you isn't a tragedy. It's a revelation. It's a clearing of the path, so you can see clearly who you are and what you stand for. I might be older, but I'm not done living. I've got my dog, my daughter, and a fresh appreciation for every sunrise. And if Lydia ever thought I'd simply fade away quietly, she discovered that she was wrong. Nothing is more surprising to those who underestimate us seniors than realizing we can defend ourselves quite handily when push comes to shove. So that's my story, the long and winding tale of how I nearly lost everything while recovering from heart surgery, only to reclaim it all in one decisive stroke. It started with frustration and fear, but ended with a bittersweet victory. If you take anything from my experience, let it be this. Never assume someone is powerless just because they're old, or kind, or unassuming. Betray someone's trust at your own peril. One day, you might look up and see that the person you thought was weak is actually the one holding all the cards. And by the time you realize it, it might be far too late to set things right. For me, I'll keep living in the house I legally protected, enjoying the quiet mornings and the warmth of a loyal dog at my side. My heart still beats, stitched and scarred but steady. And every beat is a reminder that, in the twilight of my life, I discovered a strength I never knew I had. I discovered that even a frail old man can stand up, cane in hand, and refuse to be walked over. That, my friends, is the kind of power that no surgery, no betrayal, and no heartbreak can take away.